Good morning and welcome to Jew in the City Speaks with your host, Allison Josephs, also known as Jew in the City. There's a lot of common themes that we talk about on this show. Some of it is representation of Orthodox Jews in media. Another common theme is the off the derech phenomenon, people leaving Jewish observance. Because we work with this population in our Makom branch, and also because the topic of people leaving observance has become so popular in recent years that it's become really its own genre of television, of streaming services. First started with memoirs. There's obviously a lot to talk about in this space. These are really interesting, gripping stories. Because we work with people with these stories up close at Makom, there's a lot of painful stories, and of course, stories that people should be able to tell. I think one of the challenges that we've raised here at Jew in the City, though, is that when you repeatedly over and over again tell stories of people leaving and rejecting their Jewish background, it can give viewers, give the larger world, non-Jews, non-Orthodox Jews, and Orthodox Jews themselves that we are a population of people only worthy of leaving. It's a little bit hard to hear a story of rejection when we never heard a story, the backstory of like what was worth being, Jewish or observant in the first place. And to talk to us today about all these issues and some different ways that she's interfaced with them is a popular shaitel brand and Instagrammer, Zelda Hair. You may know her on Instagram, Zelda Volkov, and now Leibowitz. She just recently got remarried. So Zelda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is really a conversation I love having. So thank you so much.
So yeah, if you could just start us off, because we're going to cover now like a documentary that you've been working on and a sort of your own journey, I guess, away and back. How did you grow up Jewishly? Like where and how did you grow up in the Jewish community?
Sure. So I grew up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, in the headquarters of the Chabad movement, the Chabad circle. My parents are actually Russian. They were Russian refugees right by the fall of the communist regime. And so when they, escaped Russia at the time in the late 1980s, they settled in Crown Heights because the Rebbe, who was, the leader of the Chabad movement, actually sent emissaries all across the world, but specifically in Russia at the time and Europe at the time for these Russian refugees that were leaving a very sort of godforsaken country. There was no conversation about God or religion at all. And everything was really in hiding or in secret if there was something at all. So my parents grew up, really secular under the communist regime. And when they left Russia, they went to America by way of Vienna and Italy on sort of like a European journey that a lot went through, and they got connected there with the Chabad emissaries that were sent by the Rebbe. And so they were sent to Crown Heights because that's kind of where they started to get affiliated. So when they were so hungry for spirituality, for a connection with God. And so they were just really, they cleaved to it so strongly. And so when they decided to go on this journey, on this religious journey, like full force, they raised us very much, in Judaism, in Judaism with like a full on, there's nothing else. Everything else in the world is really, nothing in comparison. Like there is nothing of substance, because that's really was their experience. They were really tortured by, the secular world in Russia. So they wanted to give their children, all of the holiness, all of the insulation from all the terrible things that they experienced from anti-Semitism, from Russians. So they really raised us with this idea that, godliness and Judaism is the only and absolute truth. And so they really wanted to protect us. And so they raised us within the Chabad system and fully Chabad in the full, ultra Orthodox way. And usually a lot of people, when they hear that I come from Chabad, they're sort of confused because I feel like in the world, Chabad kind of looks more modern compared to the other ultra-Orthodox communities, Satmar, the communities in Borough Park and Williamsburg, which are a lot of the communities that are portrayed in the media when they're trying to kind of give that ultra-Orthodox impression. So a lot of people are usually confused with Chabad. And so I always say that there's a full spectrum of like sort of religious levels in Chabad. Yeah. People that uphold the full standard of ultra-Orthodoxy to the full extent of the law, very similar to, people in Borough Park and Williamsburg, even though on the outside, maybe they're dressed more modern, but they're dressed very modestly, to, the more modern, lighter approach of, people that kind of, bend the rules a little here and there to kind of fit their more secular lifestyle. So you'll find, sorts of all sorts of ways. And I think that mostly it if there's a reason why that is because Chabad is really trained, and we grow up within the system for outreach. So a lot of, the way in which we're taught is for questions and for, not just you do it and that's it, but you really to kind of raise awareness within the more secular environments and communities that were raised sort of to go out and, do outreach for all those Jews that weren't, exposed to Judaism. However, I will say that we always, growing up, me and amongst my friends, we always discussed this idea how often we felt that we were raised with a lot of, open-mindedness to the communities outside of our own, for people never been exposed to Judaism or any of the mitzvot or any of, for anything about it. And we're very much open-minded and not judgmental and very accepting. Whereas for ourselves, families, there's sort of a whole different, parameters of what's considered acceptable. So there is that discrepancy that definitely is very much an issue, I think, in our schools, in our system. And so, that's something that I myself like to kind of tackle on my own Instagram page and on my own conversations, because it's something that I think is, in my opinion, in order to really do outreach out into the world, we need to start at home. And so that's something I have really witnessed firsthand in my shop, dealing with Orthodox women. That was really my niche. It's who I was dealing with, all day, every day. So it's something that I really had, a window into those types of conversations and situations. And so I realized that even though I was trained and, really taught about outreach to people who have never even saw an Orthodox Jew, none of that can really happen in a sustainable fashion if we don't, fix up the issues at home.
It's an excellent point. And I would say even, the experience that I've seen amongst our Makom members versus what I would call, healthier families, amongst the Hasidic or Lubavitch or Yeshivish world. I think that idea of being flexible and kind of giving your children grace is also just part of a healthier mindset that can vary from family to family. And you can find that in other communities as well. If, in a non-Jewish or secular family, there's a plan that the kid has to be a doctor, and there's no way other than that one plan, a child in such a home would also feel totally squelched. And the question is, are some of these issues systemic? Are certain behaviors or practices in the community normalizing this type of treatment as opposed to bringing sort of healthier standards? So this is sort of alludes to, it sounds like there was a breaking point that, you did not, this sort of upbringing did not resonate with you of sort of, grace and flexibility for people on the outside and less so for you. So where did you start to make your separation?
So I think that, growing up within the system, I was always sort of like a go-getter, very competitive, and I always kind of wanted to be the best of whatever it is that I was doing. So whether it's in school, I wanted to always get top grades. I wanted to make, valedictorian. I wanted to get to the best seminary. It was always kind of like, I wanted to be the best at where I'm at. And it wasn't necessarily in alignment with who I was individually. It was just like, if I'm doing it, I'm going to, get to the top. And only later did I realize I don't even know if I was so present. It was just more of like, if I'm applying myself, if I'm here, then I'm going to apply myself to what we're doing. But it wasn't so much like a conscious decision of, this is, what sets my soul on fire. It was like there's no real options here. Like, this is school. Definitely, Torah and Judaism always resonated with me as the truth. I never, ever felt that this is something that is wrong or doesn't feel truthful to me. It was just more like, I never felt that I really had the true power of choice, and I realized a few years ago where pride is very much correlated to choice. When you have Jewish pride, or even people with their gay pride or whatever pride they have, it comes with standing up to the people that they may have had to risk the relationships with, or even in times of anti-Semitism or the pogroms in Europe. They always said that it's so much easier to kind of be religious when everyone's killing you than it is when it's so free and open and modern, and you're not going to lose your job for the sake of your Judaism. So that Jewish pride, when it comes at the risk of your own work and your own toil and standing up for it, there's really that aspect of really being proud with your choice and kind of having that autonomy, and it's very connected. So I feel like I wasn't owning my choices, and so that's why the pride wasn't there so much, and it was just kind of like I was going with the flow and going through the motions. So I would say that after seminary, the next thing on the checklist, for someone that's just kind of going with the flow but trying to stay on top as well, it was to get married. So I went through, the system, which was, the shidduch system, and I got married after 3 dates, which was very common at the time. I was 19, and so he was the first guy that I went out with, and I was very, sort of pure in my in that, in that state. It was like really the first guy I ever spoke to, and I was very eager to kind of make my parents proud and build a family on purity and on the faith. And I really was applying myself to that pure faith. And then kind of everything started to hit me all at once when I realized that that wasn't enough just to kind of have that simple faith and to go in with a real kind of I would just call it a simple faith. Like that wasn't me, because me and my husband at the time, my first husband, were worlds apart. He's British, and while he is an amazing dad, we really didn't have any kind of intimate friendship or relationship. It was very much technical and very much we were building this family, sort of like business partners that were kind of with our children. And that kind of was enough for me, to justify and to defend for some time with what I had at the time, with my consciousness, with my self-awareness. But as time went on and I built my business and I was traveling and I was questioning more and I felt, stronger inside, a lot, I couldn't rest that idea that, that he's just an amazing dad. Like that wasn't enough for me, because I felt like he is an amazing dad and he will be an amazing dad for the rest of time. That doesn't mean that we have to, stay married. But there was a lot of fear because there was a lot of stigma. Now I feel like slowly the community is sort of growing from that, even though there's still, but especially at the time, there was a lot of stigma for, single moms, for divorce. And so that was definitely a worry. But I also knew that, if I wanted to be the best mother that I could be, I do need to go on this journey of just self, figuring out things for myself, not just staying in the marriage because I'm having like physical help from their father, but, I really needed that. And it wasn't even a religious, Jewish, conscious choice. It was, at the time I was very observant. I was, wearing, only modest clothing. I was wearing a wig all the time. I was, selling and making wigs. So it definitely wasn't, sort of like, oh, I'm going to get divorced and I'm going to be free from religion. It was a feeling of like, I'm going to be free for myself and make a decision, that right now doesn't feel right for me because we are not soulmates. Like, it did not feel like we were partners other than parents of our children.
So let me interject here and say that right around this time, a documentary about your life started getting filmed, right? So now our viewers can understand that you're making this big life decision. You're still religious, but you meet up with a producer and she starts filming you in your life. Am I right about the timeline?
Yes. So right when I got divorced, about 4 or 5 days later, Lauren had reached out and she asked if, she's doing a story on wigs, and if I could, meet with her and see if we were in alignment with, sharing my life as it pertains to wigs. At the time, it was a story of wigs, and I said sure. And so, really, when I got divorced, it only hit me later, sort of like, wow, I'm divorced and I'm a single mom. But at the time, it was very much like, this feels like the right thing to do. It wasn't heavy. So I was very renewing all of my, affairs and work and all the hats that I've been juggling, continuously. I didn't feel like there was any kind of gap at the time. I feel like things started to hit me later on. So I met with her and, we hit it off, and she was starting to film, my life, my day to day, my kids, my job, my work, things like that. We spoke a lot about modesty. And at the time, modesty was who I was. It wasn't even difficult for me because I feel like I had, kind of, created my style around modesty in a way that like good for me and in a way that, was trendy. So that was, where I was at the time. And then I started dating my ex-boyfriend at the time. And I feel like that's sort of when everything started to really sort of gradually and then all at once kind of hit me with, I think that as soon as I was conscious of the cognitive dissonance within myself, that's when I was saying, I was brave enough to kind of get divorced and, get out of this mold and not care what people think. Why is it so hard for me to, be public about the fact that I don't wear a wig sometimes? Because that's when I started to take off my wig. And that was a real question for me, because it wasn't only how I will seem in the community. It was also my livelihood. It was also my business. So that was a little bit of a tougher process for me, because I was like, why would, I was very much like the face of my business, and I was promoting the wigs, and it was so easy for me to sell because it was who I was. It wasn't even like I was selling it. It was, this is what I do, what I wear. And so when I took it off, because I didn't feel connected to the idea at all to wear a wig that is so connected to marriage and not be married, and dating my ex-boyfriend at the time, who was not connected to my wig at all, it didn't feel right at all. And I took it off, and I was very, open with my followers and my clients. And I felt like, it carried me through, till then. And so I wanted to just continue that transparency. And of course, I don't think it, affected my business. And then that kind of took me on a journey of really questioning everything and giving myself the permission to really question, the foundation of my faith, and not just how it is reflected in my day-to-day life, but really like my beliefs and my thoughts and God. And so I realized that, from birth, I was really given all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom, all of this entire lifestyle. And I wasn't really given the choice, because it was just so obviously the only way to everyone around me that there was no room to question. And because my personality was very much a pleaser and very much, always wanted to make my parents proud, always wanted to make my family proud, always wanted to be the best and the top, I never even questioned it, really. It wasn't really something it wasn't, I didn't even know what my hobbies were. It was just like, yeah, like, I was, just wanted to kind of always impact in a positive way and never like disrupt the peace, or never just, create any kind of tension or.
So just as sort of as a note to parents right now, because I think, again, from our experience with Makom members, I think there's a couple of things that loving and well-meaning parents can make mistakes on whatever. Parents will make mistakes all over the place. That's part of parenting. Two things that I think we should just sort of say explicitly is that a kid does need to be told, your kids do need to be told, I love you no matter what. You're always my baby. They need to know that the love is unconditional and that is not contingent upon, what grades they get or what mitzvahs they do, that you're here for them for the long haul because they're your baby and you're the parent. And that for sure reflects our relationship to our parent in heaven, that no matter how many mistakes we make or how far away we get, that we'll always be Hashem's children, and there's nothing can do that can ruin that. The other thing is creating an environment where questions are invited. When a child doesn't feel comfortable to ask questions, they could come to the conclusion, maybe it's because we don't have the answers. To explicitly tell your children throughout their upbringing what's on your mind, bring me your best questions, give them praise for asking good questions. These types of notes within parenting are really helpful to let the child know that you will still love them and be there for them, even if they were to run away and stop all Jewish observant tomorrow, and that the home is a place to have open conversation. Okay, that's just my narration. Yes, continue.
And I do want to add, it's actually very timely because it's coming up for Pesach, and Pesach is all about questions, the 4 sons and all our questions. And I think it's important also to realize that sometimes we're so afraid to be labeled the Tam or the Shein Elidei Lishal, and we want to just be labeled the Chacham, but it's important to realize we are all 4. We have times where we feel very passionate and we know we are very motivated and we feel very clear and we have tons of clarity. And then sometimes something can happen and we are just totally at a loss. And I think that as a parent myself, we have fear. We want obviously what's best for our child. We want our child to be, a citizen that is that could contribute to society. We want them to be meaning, to live a life that's full of meaning and contentment, and to just be happy. But the thing is that it's a process, and I feel like we wish we could just press all the buttons and there's like a shortcut for our children. But the process of a child, learning to walk is falling, and I think that that's the hardest thing for a parent. And I think that there was, an analogy that I heard that was just so great, that it's like when a car is not working, you press the gas and it's just not working. You could press the gas even more and you could give it even more energy. But if it's not going, it's not going. And often what it needs is actually release of pressure. You need to take off the emergency brake. That actually happened to me this morning. You actually need to release the pressure in order, because it seems so counterintuitive. It seems so like the opposite do if you love your child. Stepping back seems like the last thing you're going to do, but that's actually what it is that they need. And they need us to release the pressure, but not in a way that, do whatever you want, it's your life, mess it up if you want it. Not in that way, but in a way that I trust you, I trust you. So you're going to rise up to the occasion, rather than, looking at them, judging them. And more times than not, when we look down on them, they fall to that prediction.
So just to recap, so Lauren Greenhall, producer at New York Post, who you did an interview with first on your company, comes in. She's filming your story. There's interest in big networks to pick up this documentary, and then over time it sort of falls away from the wig angle and starts to just now focus on your life, which was a religious life and a modest life, and now it's sort of a life of maybe yet another OTD story to appear on one of these networks.
Yeah. So at first it was, I was supposed to just do my wigs, how I manufacture and how I make them, and all about how hair and wigs impact, people, Americans. 1 in 3 people actually wear something in their head, like wigs or extensions. So first it was that angle. And then as soon as I sort of took off my wig and started questioning my own path, and I really left observance, and I got tattoos, and I became a life coach, and I really started to apply myself to a lot of conversations that I was learning from a lot of monks, and just the Buddhist culture and the Buddhist religion, and just a lot of their philosophies and psychology, and in general secular psychology really interested me. Anything that was like sourced in Torah was like very triggering for me. And so it was like I really just applied myself to the wisdom in the other
Nations.
nations. And so it was very interesting, because I actually created a course for becoming more myself, and I was teaching all this, and I was like quoting everybody you could think of,
But the
and yeah. And so it's like when you could have the truth right in your face, you could be fed the truth, but if you're going to be if someone's going to choke you with it, then it's not healthy either. And so that's how I felt. So it's like there is such a thing as too much good, and that's where I felt that I was. And so I really, and actually now I'm redoing my entire course through the lens of Hasidus and Kabbalah, because it's a real waste not to use what we have. But so she filmed me through that sort of journey. The entire story kind of changed constantly and continuously because I was changing. So she was like, I never thought, this is how it would go. And so she was filming, I think now she has like 4, almost maybe 5, I think like 4.5 years of footage. So there's a lot there.
So you told me that Jew in the City actually had an impact on you on this journey, and we only connected very recently, and it was such a touching story. If you could share with us.
Yeah, so a couple of years, this was, I think more than 5 years ago. I went with my cousins, Dima and Vera, who's actually been a big part of my journey as well. And they were really excited about the gala, the dinner that you guys were having.
The All-Star Awards, yeah.
Yes, the All-Star Awards. And, what caught my attention was that you were honoring Joyce Azria, who to me, she was, someone that I looked up to in fashion and modesty. And so I was really excited, and I had no idea I did not know her on a personal level. I only knew her from what I saw on Instagram and in the media. And so her speech was just so inspiring. I didn't even come up to her because I was so shy, and then years later, she actually bought a wig for me, and then we got reconnected. And it's just crazy how, it comes full circle. And she's really a huge part of my coming back into religion when I moved to Florida during COVID. And I really was very, far from my observance at the time. And she, because of the wigs that she bought for me, we got reconnected. And she really inspired me through Shabbos and just through her kindness and her wisdom.
Beautiful. Tell us about, and we have to come to a close shortly. You wrote a message to Julia Hart when My Unorthodox Life came out. You're both the children of Russian parents who became Baalei Tshuva, who were raised in a strict environment. Can you share with us that Instagram message and sort of your perspective on what this unorthodox journey is about versus how the media shows it?
Yes, absolutely. So when I really only watched, I think I got to like the first 2 episodes. It just really struck me as somebody that is angry, resentful, and is on the trajectory of, fame and fortune. And I realized that because I too was in that space, not of fame and fortune, because that didn't really connect to me, but I really wanted to just be myself. And anyone that would get in the way of that, I would preach and lecture and like just go. I was just in that, very resentful, angry stage because I felt like I wasn't allowed to be who I wanted to be. And so when the part that really got to me was when she was sort of enforcing or really infringing on her son's sort of comfort level of how he wants to interact with girls and how he wants to date. That really bothered me. And because I actually had, my daughter, she's 11 now, but no matter where I was in my religious observance, she always wanted to be tznius. She always wanted to be modest. She's really pure and beautiful. And it always really bothered her when I wouldn't be tznius. And so I would always try to have the conversation with her that the way I dress, obviously it affects her because I'm her mother, but I really need to, in certain times, like when I go to her school, when I go to her classmates, obviously then I have to really, honor her feelings and honor her comfort. However, all the other times when I'm doing my work and I'm just living my life, I really have to also live in alignment with myself. However, at the time when I was so triggered with modesty, I could have easily made her, at the time she was like 6, 7, you're wearing this and you're wearing that. And I never had the chance to wear, jeans, and I never had the chance to wear this. And this is, you want to be cool and you want to, I could have totally broken her by not allowed her to really express herself through her own soul and the way that she felt connected to. But I really had to push myself and say, this is literally the opposite of what I experienced in the other way. And just because I experienced the opposite doesn't make it right. This is where I am right now. Who knows what I'm going to, be feeling tomorrow. But right now, this is how she wants to dress. And she has every right to dress how she wants, especially when it's in the form of modesty. It's not like she wants to, just dress, provocatively and, expose herself in a dangerous fashion. So this is something that I actually have to really work on myself. And I felt like resonance in it when I saw how Julia was sort of infringing on her son's comfort. Mm-hmm. And so what I wanted to say is that when we aren't in charge of our behaviors, of our actions, when we don't feel like we truly have the power, then we need to sort of, I don't want to say pretend, but what we need, that power needs to go somewhere. There needs to be a release of that power somewhere. And so the truth is, when you really do have power, usually you find that you don't really need to enforce it. You don't really need to, to scream it from the rooftops, because and that's the only thing that matters. When and it's that you don't need to, enforce it. So I felt that that's really what made me uncomfortable about her and about the show. And I hope that she's able to really give herself that space to heal and to have that therapy and to really allow her children to manifest their individual light rather than what she feels they need to do.
Because essentially whatever sort of messaging she got at home, where she was feeling controlled by, the home dynamics, she's now sort of continuing that onto her children and kind of repeating that cycle of dysfunction. I think there's so much of sort of the mental health journey as sort of part of the thing that makes Judaism feel like it's not a choice or that it's something painful, and makes so many of these things triggered, because ultimately we should raise our children. God gives us free will. And so we have to be able to give that over to our children so they can feel like they have the choice to choose or not choose and still be lovable and whole and, acceptable to us. So, fascinating story. And we're super excited to see this journey unfold, hopefully on a streaming service or a big network sometime soon. And what an interesting twist of events of in the community on the way out, and then getting to watch your journey, sort of that authentic journey of finding your way back.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm excited to see what I did 4 years ago. I almost forgot.
Well, Art, we wish you continued hatzlacha in, really connecting in an authentic way. And thank you to our viewers for watching. You can catch us same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.